All right, brother. Well, we're in. Welcome to the Cured podcast. I'm stoked to have you here today, Jordan.
Likewise, man. I'm a huge Joseph Sheehey fan, dude, and like Cured fan, and it's cool being friends now and just getting to know you because I've been a fan for a long time, not just of your company, but of you as an individual. So it's an honor to be here.
I appreciate that, man. I think one thing that's really driven more and more of our connection over this year is, although in different industries, both being business owners, seeing you speak to scaling, building business systems, which we'll talk about here, and seeing some of the books that you're diving into, just so much of like a reflection of a lot of the work that I've done personally and as a business owner as well. So that connection is strong because it does feel like a lonely place at times.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm glad you said that because I thought the same thing many a times. We're both at a place now where we're realizing how important the contextual is as compared to the minute content.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure, man. And that leads me into one of the first pillars that I want to talk about here today, and that's truth. For those of you that haven't heard me discuss this before, I've been starting to come to podcasts with like kind of like three words or three guiding stars. And today I brought truth, systems, and data. But speaking of truth, I'm kind of looking at this podcast in like half Jordan's story and then half like let's dive into business. Let's talk about data and systems. But I wanted to start with just a little bit of your story, man. You shared not too long ago on Instagram your story of your wakeboarding accident and the events that came after that, and you speaking to your truth, as we saw via social media, creates so much connection, creates so much in your vulnerability. You build a network and you build trust and you build a community of individuals that look to you as somebody that they can then see standing in truth and then build trust in. So I wanted to start there and just, have you share a little bit of that story and why it's been so impactful in creating the human that you are today.
Yeah, man, that's a great frame to the question. So I'll get into it and I'll share like the dark, ins and outs of that period of my life. But I think maybe starting with a really cool parable that I go back to, and I share this all the time. Have you ever heard the Chinese farmer, you never know if it's good or bad parable?
I don't think so.
This is great. And this relates really, it's a great pre-frame or preface to this story. And it's something that I go back to all the time whenever bad shit happens. But it goes like this. It's a ancient farmer in China was a horse farmer, right? And he lost his prized horse one morning, ran away. So neighbor comes over and to pay condolences and, just say, hey, I'm really sorry that your horse ran away. And when he came over to say that, the farmer replied, well, you never know if it's good or bad. So neighbor looked at him like, well, that's a weird response, but whatever. So goes home. Next day, the horse that had run away brought back two mares that were like really beautiful horses to the farm. So worked out great. Neighbor came over and he's like, hey, awesome, dude. Congratulations. Like, well, you never know if it's good or bad. Oh, okay. Still a weird answer, but whatever. So next day, the farmer's son was riding one of the horses that returned with the prize mare, falls off and breaks his leg. So at that point, neighbor comes over. Damn, dude, sorry to hear about your son. Neighbor still replies, well, you never know if it's good or bad. Very next day, China was going to war with the Mongolians at this point, and they basically brought all the young men in the village and in the country to go to war. Well, because the son had a broken leg, he was exempt from going to fight in the war. And like this is a story that can go on and on and on. And I think
Yeah.
that's just so representative of life.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's really powerful. And you're right. You never know.
You don't. And now that when I look back at this story that I'll share, it's so much the case because if these events would not have happened, there's no way I'd be where I am today. Like it was literally a series of events that led to a certain amount of adversity that caused me to have to toughen up, work through shit, take responsibility for my own life, and also to be humbled. So kind of goes like this. I was right after college and went to Ohio State and like had a I played college football, not at Ohio State, at a prior school. And, I was kind of like a hot shit, like big fish in a small pond growing up and like thought I was cool, got a lot of girls and just, had my head on in the wrong place and finished school, graduated with like a GPA economics department and got a good job right after college. I'm like, I'm the shit, right? Like awesome. So it was literally 2 days after graduating college and it was 24 hours after my birthday, my 23rd birthday. Went out on the lake with friends to wakeboard. And what happened was my wakeboard, the garage all winter, kind of dry rotted. For any wakeboarders out there, the 90-degree angle that typically is fixed on a wakeboard snapped while I was kind of jumping a wake. got caught. And what happened was it's called a Liz Frank injury. So it's the rarest of any orthopedic injuries of all time. It's 1 in 500,000 every year. And because that Liz Frank ligament is so strong, it holds all your metatarsals together, and it's completely ruptured, dislocated my ankle. If you envision the ball of your foot touching your Achilles tendon, basically.
Damn.
Yeah. So the story is
That's no
interesting.
joke.
Oh, dude, it was horrible. Like, I remember being underwater and hearing all the crackles and pops and thinking, like, damn, did I shit myself? Right. Because like your adrenaline's going, and then the pain set in. I was like, oh no, I fucked my foot up. So the story about it, little side note, Liz Frank, it's interesting, was a French surgeon back in the way back in the day during the French Revolution. And when his soldiers would fall off their horse, oftentimes their foot would get caught in the stirrup and would cause this effect, right? And his solution to that was cut the dude's leg off and put him back on the horse.
Damn.
Yeah. So it wasn't until about 10 years ago were they able to even repair this. Before that, it was amputation.
Damn.
Yeah.
Holy shit. I had never heard of that before. And it's wild to speak about the type of injury and falling off a horse with what you just shared. And I'm sure that's why you pulled that all together.
It's an easy visual.
Yeah.
It happens a lot to football players too. What happens is they'll be planted and then somebody will fall on the back of their leg, causing the planted foot to overlap. Like Santonio Holmes, that's what ended his career, a few other players. So anyways, that had happened, and it was a rough road trying to even diagnose the issue because it's really hard to diagnose. So luckily I found a good doctor, figured it out, went in for the first surgery, did ORIF, pins, the whole nine. Then that went on for about 8 months, and I developed just a real bad pain pill addiction. This was during the time of the opioid epidemic too. And I was in a place in the country in the Midwest in Ohio where Interstate 71 ran between several states and would run all the way from Florida through Ohio. So a lot of pain pill clinics, pain mills were running pain pills back and forth. And like several of my friends growing up had gotten sucked into that life. And it just was so foreign to me. But of course, you get prescribed by a doctor and you're laid up. It's like, well, this is pretty fun. Like, I'm just going to pop these and watch Shark Tank for 9 hours a day. This isn't all that bad. So, it just evolved from there. And what happened was I just continued to, justify the cognitive dissonance of you having a problem over and over and over while they're prescribed. And it wasn't until I caught myself like kneeled down in my bedroom closet, living with a girl at the time because I was hiding from her, and I'm snorting crushed up Percocet 30s that I purchased off the street, off my gun safe. And I was doing that nightly. And finally, it just clicked. It was like, wait a minute, something isn't right here. So, even still, that went on for another 2 months, still dealing with the dissonance and being, in denial, if you will. But it was kind of the rock bottom point. And also a little side note too, I'm a science guy and like love fitness and biology. I figured out that if you drank grapefruit juice with opioids, it actually blocks a certain metabolite or an enzyme called the CYP3A4. So instead of metabolizing the drug right away, it goes right to the bloodstream. And so it stays in the body longer. So I was like biohacking my pain pills too.
I saw you put that in your caption and I was like, oh shit, that's like, it's an interesting place to be when somebody very intelligent can figure those things out and then also use it in a way that, one, it works better, but it's like also very detrimental.
Yeah. It's one of those things like my brain can be used very productively, but if I don't have something good to fix or to work on, I'm going to fuck some shit up,
Yeah.
So
that's wild.
That went on for about a year. Well, maybe 9 months. And it ended up being to which I had multiple surgeries, a total of 3, because I actually, once my foot was almost healed, I went snowboarding too early and ended up breaking one of the screws right back in the hospital. And what's funny is when that happened, I was kind of happy because I knew that my pain pills prescription was going to be running low soon. And I was like, nice, I get to start all this process over, which is a really pathetic way to think about it. But it wasn't until the rock bottom point, to summarize this, was that my very last prescription, the doctor finally had to say like, yo, dude, I can't keep writing these to you. And he was overprescribing, but at the same time, he was a good doctor. And I just don't think medical doctors were not, the way they're educated when it came to opioids was completely flawed. They changed the curriculum, they changed the standards to where there is no objective measure for pain. So as long as the patient says that they're in pain, you have to write. They've changed it since, fortunately. But I was getting like 250 Percocet 5s every 2 weeks or something. It was nuts.
Whoa.
It was nuts. Yeah.
That doesn't even seem like that could be, it doesn't seem like that could be justified, but that's wild.
Wild, man. And anyway, so, I was popping them like like Skittles. And I was actually making about $4,000 a month at the time, my first job out of college. And I was spending like 3,700 on it, on pain pills. Like,
Wow.
and I learned that if
Wow.
I ate less, I was fucked up more. Like I was barely eating. I lost like 60 pounds. Um, yeah, dark times. Well, and the rock bottom point was when I got that last prescription, and I went and I was already kind of withdrawing because I'd been out for like maybe 8 hours. So I go to the parking lot of CVS. It was, I don't know. I got the prescription the day before, but the pharmacy was closed. So I had to go all night without it. And then I'm at the parking lot in CVS at like 4 a.m, waiting for him to open at 9. And I'm sitting there and I've got diarrhea and sweats and I'm sick. And I remember just laying there thinking like, man, this is not good. Like, so it
Yeah.
was at that point that I got my last script, and, I went through that last script, and then that was it. Cold turkey, withdrew. It was rough. But after that, man, things shifted, and I got over it. And thankfully, to today, I haven't taken an opioid, to this point.
Thanks for sharing that, man. It's really powerful. And one thing that I was curious about, um, when you look at the situation that you were in, um, starting to recognize that there was an issue and then starting to move yourself out of that dark place, and then even looking at yourself as a younger man, could you sit there and like objectively say like, hey, like this is who I wanted to be, and this is where I thought I was going, and then oh shit, this is actually who I am right now? When you speak to that like dissonance, is that like the like realization of, oh fuck, like I'm nowhere, like kind of like this dissonance of like actual integrity? Am I in who I want to be, or am I in this other version that, fuck, I don't even really know how I got here?
That's a great question. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really grateful for that experience, Joseph, because what that did was it removed everything. It was like the rug got pulled out of underneath of me, and it forced me to face all these realizations and things that I hadn't really faced before, which for me, I'm grateful for. Like if I would have been dripped these things, they'd have been easier to push off.
Mhm.
But I was faced with all these things right at once. And it was almost just this like period. I can remember just laying in my bed, like crying, like being lost. Like, I don't know which way I'm going. I don't have anything figured out. Like, yeah, I've got this job, but I don't want to be at this job forever. Like, man, it was just chaos in my brain. But I think that tension, oftentimes we try to solve problems before they exist. Whereas I was faced with all the problems right away and forced to figure them out at that point. So yeah, to answer your question, I do think that there was this mirror that I had to look at, and I had no other choice but to look at it. Whereas if I was in a different situation, I probably could have kicked the can down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that's really that is inspiring to me in just watching you, because I believe that all humans, but specifically men, need to work on this, is your commitment to learning, but also like recognition of your own patterns. Like I've seen days where, you get on your story and you're like, I was an asshole today and I did this, and I can't remember the exact thing you were speaking about this one day, but you're like, I feel like I like need to demote myself. And you were like basically just saying like, hey, like I recognize the way in which however I operated today came out maybe sideways or whatever it is, and now I need to take responsibility and show up differently. And that's something that's, we've talked about this on prior podcasts, but the concept of personal responsibility and accountability is so important for every single individual in this life, but very much so men, and very much so leaders in businesses and within the walls of a business, but also within families. So I just kind of wanted to ask you about your navigation of that, and your navigation of like creating self-awareness and recognizing patterns, and um, being committed to just working through that shit, and saying, hey, like I fucked up or whatever it is, and then like correcting and being committed to that responsibility, and a new path forward.
Man, you dropped some really great questions. Yeah, so I think that there are three ways to become more self-aware, in my opinion, that I've been able to identify and have seen that they work. And number one is reading. I just think reading provides so much reflection and awareness. The second thing is then reflection upon what you're learning, journaling, taking notes, whatever that case might be, right? Some way to measure things. And the third thing is feedback. I think as men, especially because we do tend to be more ego driven and a little bit more, masculine, of like, if somebody says something about you, you're like, ah, fuck you. But there's power in feedback. Like, and if you're not the kind of individual who is going to at least create the safe space for feedback, people are going to stop giving it to you. And as soon as you stop getting feedback, you're fucked. Like, because then they're just going to let you, like, people in your life are just not going to say shit to you anymore. So that was a big thing that I learned early on, especially when I was at this rock bottom place, because I had so much of a humbling experience that when people would give me feedback, friends, family, unfortunately, I did have some good people, good friends in my life. You're like, yo, dude, you're fucking up real bad. And I was able to listen. You know, it's like, you're right. And there's something powerful to think, like, the people, when you want to help people, and this can relate to maybe people in your life who you know might need feedback, but you're unwilling to share or give it to them. Like, when you want to help people, you tell them the truth. And this comes back to the truth concept. When you want to help yourself, you'll tell them what they want to hear, right? It's more comfortable. It's easier. And it's not helping anybody except you, right? So that's something I'm really grateful for, is I did have some friends that were constantly calling me out, you know, and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think like truth over justification, like justification or trying to wrap something up in a package that makes you feel better. It might be easier in the initial phase, but in the long run, you get back to that same place. Like, I shared my story with you when I was in college. I found myself on the edge of a bridge about to kill myself. And like, just like you're saying, like, this is who I want to be. This is who I'm supposed to be, but this is who I actually am. And how did I get here? Well, how did I get here is small incremental steps of that, covering up truth, using justifications. And you can be so far away from where you want to be when you finally recognize what's going on. You're like, oh, fuck, like, what am I going to do? And then unfortunately for some individuals in this life, that's where an addiction just wins and you just stay there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it can be a slippery slope. I'll just put it that way. I want to switch to business now, and to the impact that you're creating in this world.
If you
You
don't
and
mind,
Aaron.
I just want to add
Yeah.
one quick note to that last topic that I
Yeah.
think is important. And I think you would agree to this, like, just one summarizing statement. And I hope somebody hears this and says, wow, I haven't done this yet. You and I both reached a point to which we had to admit that we were lost. And like, if you're going through life and you just don't admit that, like, and it's not just admitting it, like, yeah, I'm kind of like, no, it's like deeply declaring that, like, I'm fucking lost, then you will not attract the resources to help you be found. Like, you've got to declare that. And hopefully you don't have to go through something like you and I went through to do that. But sometimes that has to happen, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for stopping on that. It's true. And I think the thing that we fear so much is that in that admission, it feels like death. But know that within that admission, it's a death of a version of you and a birth of a new version. It's not like actual death. It is scary as fuck, but it's the dying off of those parts of ourselves that we really have to get rid of to step into that next version of ourselves. We
Yeah.
take pieces of that prior foundation. Like, you've been somebody that's moved your body and really enjoyed working out and fitness probably your entire life. And same for me. Like, that's a piece, and we want to keep that foundation, but what are these other things that we're going to explore and get rid of? So yeah, I appreciate that, man. Let's dive into the world of business and everything that you and Aaron are doing, everything that you are doing, the business that you're creating. So can you just speak to quickly overview of your business, and then we'll dive into some of the questions around systems and data and things that I'm really curious about.
Yeah. So broad level overview is I'll start with our vision. The vision of our companies is to accelerate growth and transformation, both within ourselves, within our team, within our clients. And we do that through a few different modalities. So number one, we have T4E, Transform Forever Systems. It's a online fitness coaching company that we specialize. We do some like general lifestyle coaching, but we also are a clinician-based company. So we have a few RDs on our team. We've got an endocrinologist, some hormone specialists, and we try to help women primarily who are dealing with really difficult type situations, hormonal, gut dysbiosis, things like that. So we have some really great team that's our thing there. We work with about 275 clients around the world or so. We've got 7 coaches over there, and 1 operations director and a sales manager. And then on our other side of the business, we have Impact Fitness Coaching Academy, which our goal and our mission is to be the all-in-one incubator to build great coaches, to support great coaches, not just in the tactical, not just in anything like that, but in the contextual, in the growth as a person, the container as a human being, the kind of development that you need to be able to be an entrepreneur. And that's been a learning process. We're on year 3 now. We've worked with over 250 coaches, and not until now, I think, have we really started to scratch the surface on what really is important. And that's why our results have really reflected that, because we're going deep in the human and the container that needs to be created in order to be an entrepreneur, right? Rather than just giving somebody these tactics. Sure, you might get a few clients, shit might happen, but where are you at 6 months down the road, right? So what we do there is we work with fitness coaches in a 14-week accelerator model. And we do that 2 times a year, while we also have some digital products. We have a course for more entry-level coaches called Immediate Impact. We have an ascension program. So when people go through IFCA, they then qualify. They qualify depending on certain commercial factors as well as cultural factors to be a part of our inner circle community. So that's kind of the more thing after that. And then as a part of the inner circle community, we have an agency, which we run funnels, paid ads, different things like that, tax services, stuff like that. So that's kind of the broad level overview.
That's awesome. I love that shit, man. That's like, I think one of the coolest things about being an entrepreneur is just the evolution of a business. And almost like, I think you shared this at one point. I can't remember if it was on social media or if it was in conversation with me. But it was just talking about like core values, mission, and systems. And it was like, you said something around, this is what scaling looks like. And it's so interesting to think about that, because when you describe your businesses from the outside looking in, it could seem potentially like, wow, that there's a lot going on there. It could be very complicated. There's a lot of systems that are going on, and that may be the case. But at its foundation, the way in which you spoke to what your company does and what your companies do is simplist. It's simplistic. You have an impact, and you're moving individuals forward in life, and it's through a specific avenue. But it's wild that, and personally, when I started seeking mentors within business over the last several years, it was like simplification of something that I used to complicate so much. Is like, what do you value? What are you going to impact? And how are you going to get it done? And so when you speak about your businesses, I want to ask a question around systems. And I want to understand if, the implementation of those systems and how it's looked like over the course of owning the business. Can you say that they've evolved? Would you say that they didn't exist at one point? Would you say that they kind of existed and then you cleaned them up? How would you describe how your business systems work?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. So really simple scales, you've got to keep things simple. The simpler, the more scalable. And that's been a learning process. And I've always had a knack to that to a degree. I came from a background where I'd started a couple businesses that like did okay for a minute, then blew up. And so I'd kind of fucked some shit up first to realize how important processes and systems are. Like everything we do in business needs to be a system. It needs to be a repeatable, communicable, documented process, even things that are more contextual. Like for example, culture. A lot of people look at, and I'm excited to talk about culture with you, because people look at culture as a thing that's like, oh, you just get the right people in place and you have a good work environment. You have some beanbag chairs in your office. And like, we drink every Thursday, like that creates a cool culture. No, culture is a system. Culture is built on 2 things, built on language that we use and rituals that we stick to. Like you gotta have a process to reinforce culture through a system. And so like always thinking that way has been a little bit of it's something that's interesting to me too, because it's kind of like a puzzle. So with Impact Fitness Coaching Academy, primarily, we didn't try to scale too fast. I think that's why we've been able to be successful. Like our very first round of students, we had 13. Our second round, we had 20. Third round, we had 33. Next round, it was like 45. Now we're at round 7 and we have 75 students. We could have just tried to like open the gates, and every round we stopped enrollment. We could have taken more clients. We could have made more money, but we did not want to break the system that we had and potentially implicate student results and experience. Like, so the thing that I've learned too is that usually every like 3x. So every time the business, like in our business, when we were at like 500K, we had a system that was working. But once we got to about like 1.2, 1.5, everything was fucked. Had to remove everything, And now we're creeping up on 3, and the same thing's happening. We got to just clear the slate and rebuild everything, and that's going to be the case.
Yeah, It's an interesting place. I don't know how, I know you're working with several mentors yourself. One of my mentors he continues to tell me between 2 and 5 million is the hardest place to be. I'm like, fuck, I feel it every single day. Like it feels like we've been stagnant for a while on my end. And I'm just like, well, what do we need to do? And a lot of it has been literally breaking down systems and saying, well, that's not even really doing anything for us. Like it exists. I thought that there was some like this like nice like looking thing, but it's really just fluff. And understanding what's fluff and what's actually like your economic engine. If I was speaking to like some of Jim Collins' work and like Good to Great, it's like there is a simple economic system, there's a mission and a purpose, and then there's like something that you can actually be the best at. And when you find like the intersection of those, it really defines what your business is. So I'm excited to watch you all as you continue to move through this, because it inspires me and it continues to fire me up, because it's not, as I said in the beginning, it's used to seem like a very lonely place, but even though we don't talk about this directly very much, I know what situation you're in. And as an individual that owns a business as well, it's comforting to know like, hey, we're committed to the same amount of to the same type of work in building businesses. And
Yeah.
you were speaking about culture. I'm curious as to, is your business is 100% remote, right?
Yes, correct. Yep.
So Cured, we went from in person to 2020 remote, and now we're like coming back in person. I want to understand leadership from a leadership, and culture can be infused into this, but just leadership from a standpoint of, finite phone calls that are face to face versus like in person presence. And then maybe there's not much of a question there, but I'm just trying to understand what leadership has been like for you and maybe lessons that you've learned over the years.
Yeah, man, this is a great topic. And we've got 18 team members, 18 like full-time. Right. And it's, we used to just do shit that was just so all over the place. Like we would literally, Joe, for a good 8 months, I would every Saturday and Sunday, I would sit down and I would spend like 5 or 6 hours mapping out every employee's week, like tasks, everything they're going to do. And then we'd meet on Monday, a 2-hour meeting where we would run through it all, ask all these questions. And then the next week it would be like, well, did you get it done? Running off a Google Doc. Like it was just so ridiculous. And the biggest lesson in that is like understanding that you're hiring people for a thing, right? Like what's the thing that they own in the business? What's the problem that they're taking ownership? Every employee should be able to say the one thing that they own in the company. Like what's their one thing that contributes to the vision? And that's been so helpful for us. And it requires relinquish of control and not trying to like handle all the details, right? So like a big process for us that's helped a lot is like a really efficient KPI system. We call it our WEC. And what we do is every Monday, all 17 people, they read through their WEC and we get it done in 30 minutes. And it's been just this game changer. It's taken us a while to get there and it's been clunky, but like I've been timing them lately. And now we're down to 30 minutes. That's 17 employees reporting whether or not they're on target for their different items or they're off target or whatever it is in 30 minutes. And then what happens from there is cool. If they're off target, if they need support, we just say, cool, who do you want to collaborate with? Who do you need support from? We schedule meetings accordingly, like outside of that meeting. So we don't go off track on the WEC meeting, right? It's just boom, 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 boom. And it's keeping things contextual, because what are the things that you own and what are the actual measurable and trackable date? What's the data in the system between that, right? Like, so for example, we have categories on our WEC. We have like financial, like lag metric. Then we have team, client. Then we have innovation and compliance. So it's like everybody is owning certain pieces of that, right? So if it's our salespeople, they're running through financial. Hey, how many clients did you close? What's your closing rate? And then if it's like coaches, like team, right? What are your retention numbers? Like all these things, we just track them. And that's the metric to which we even focus on, because if they're off, cool. How do we get them back on track? We don't get lost in the weeds of content and all that kind of stuff, right? And it gives people ownership of their roles, where we're not there to like fucking say you're doing a shitty job. If things are off, that just means we need to shine a flashlight on them, you know?
Yeah. And in doing that, you very clearly show your team members what matters most to you. Hey, we're looking at this metric. So, hey, this is what matters most to me. So if there's a problem, I'm going to try and solve it because I want to tweak this metric and I understand what my responsibility is. Have you studied Jim Collins' work?
No, but I would like to though. I mean, I'm familiar with him. Yeah.
Yeah, because he speaks exactly to that. It's called OPUR. It's OPUR, one person ultimately responsible. And so what it is like, hey, there's one person ultimately responsible for our social media, our email, our fulfillment, and whatever it is within your business. But when that happens, it takes away, like, systems talk. There's cross-functional um, the cross-functional communication and collaboration within a business. It has to happen. That's how the bigger system works. But you also have to make it very clear where one responsibility ends and the other one picks up. And defining that one person ultimately responsible, OPER, has been really powerful for us. And it also just, it also helps, like, if somebody's going to be out for a couple of days or something like that. Well, okay, well, cool. Who's the closest person to you who can understand how that responsibility works and can dive in or jump in when that person's out? Yeah, I'll share some books of his with you.
Well, dude, I want you to know too, like one thing I'm trying to get more intentional about is I remove myself from the business more and like just give myself more space because man, over the last like year, it's been like 14-hour days nonstop. It's just like having more time to connect with friends and people in these in it. Like that's a big goal of mine. So at any point, dude, if you're like, yo, Jordan, would you want to hop on a call and chat? Like I've got some shit I'm trying to work through. Like even if it's just speaking it out loud, I would love that. Like,
yeah, let's do it, man. That means a lot to me. And I think that's a huge reflection for myself, as like, when wherever cured goes, wherever happens after this business, can I look back on this time and see that, yes, I was fulfilled, but also I was, like, present in the moment. And sometimes when we get to the point where using busy becomes an excuse, I get frustrated with myself when I do that because I can recognize that. And I just want to say, hey, like, I want to look around, smell the fucking roses and be fucking proud. And also just, like, know that it's not a race. And I think that's been the hardest thing for me, is, like, not thinking that forgetting that it's not a race. It's like there are lessons to be learned within every single stage of business. Obviously, cash flow is always important, and it is something that will always be hard, regardless of where you're at. And it's something that can cause a lot of anxiety, and it's always going to be there. But your business can still operate for days on end without you doing anything. Hopefully, if you've built the correct systems and metrics for a business to operate. And let's be honest, in the beginning of businesses, as individuals that start the business, that's not the case for some time. It takes some time to get there. But I think it's really important for us to give ourselves that permission to breathe and to reflect and actually have these conversations. And I don't think enough of that conversation and community exists within business owners.
I agree. We tend to, I think, play victim sometimes. I know I catch myself doing that, where if I'm dealing with a lot of problems and just a lot of stress, I'm like, well, nobody else gets it. Like nobody understands, like, but people do. There are people out there that certainly do get it, that have done it. And it's, and for me, like one of the most complimentary thing that I can ever receive, if somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, like, I'd like to bounce some things off you, or I'd like your help on something. Like a big like driver for me is just service, like being of service to people and adding value. So like I try to remind myself of that. Like, yo, you're not being a hassle. Like, if you reach out to somebody, it could be an ultimate compliment to them and actually help them in some way too,
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I'm writing down right now, reach out to Jordan to talk about anything.
Yeah, dude. And that's something that I've just gotten away from, that I want to make more of a priority. Like lately, if I don't have in my power list and my tasks where it's like, reach out to friends, it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. There's been a couple things that were bouncing around in my head as we were just speaking. One of them is like data driven decisions. So within the first couple of years of our business, I personally was really tied to certain things operating in a certain way. So there was a lot of emotion behind decision making, and if something didn't come to fruition exactly how I wanted it to look or how I expected it to, I had emotion driving a decision or a correction of action. And to be fully transparent here, I haven't shared this with several individuals, but we almost went out of business at the beginning of 2020, end of 2019, beginning of 2020. We ran into a massive cash flow problem. And I look back on before that, and it was emotion driven decisions versus data driven decisions. So I wanted to speak to you about data a little bit. And you talk about metrics within your team. How do you remove yourself from that emotional situation and continue to be committed to what the data is telling you? And how does that guide the way that you make decisions within your business and anything within life?
No, man, I love that. Yes, I think I've got a good answer for this, but one thing I wanted to relate on the prior conversation, like if anybody's listening to this and you haven't read the book E-Myth, it's a great book in this principle, because especially like I work with a lot of coaches and I'm constantly telling them, look, if your business, this applies for anybody, but if your business relies on you, and this is a quote from E-Myth, like you don't own a business, you have a job. And I love this because it's like, and it's the worst job in the world because you're working for a lunatic. Just so true. Like
That's
it's
fucking true.
one of my
I
favorite
forgot
quotes
about
ever.
that.
It's like, oh, cool. We're as entrepreneurs, we're the antithesis of like being controlled in the 9 to 5. Then you put yourself in this thing where you have like everybody's your boss. Like even like you're your boss, your clients are your boss. You're just at this helm of everybody else's decisions, and it's not a good life to live. So, remove yourself. Figure out how to remove yourself. But anyways, on that subject, like one of the biggest mistakes that we made early on was not having a data system, and that's been like the bane of my existence over the last 6 months, probably about 8 months now, has been taking a step back and putting in place better data systems. Because like, and if any coaches are listening to this or any business, have data systems early. Like for us, we're a service-based business, right? So a CRM, a customer relationship manager, and some sort of a sales tracking system is so vital. Because otherwise, for example, and this applies even for like early coaches, you might have a bad sales week where you don't close several calls, and you can start to get in your head, and then you'll make decisions because you think, well, my prices are too high or my offer is shitty. And you start to change things when really, if you look at the month, you're still closing at 70%. So it's like, hey, chill out. You just had a bad streak. Like, don't change shit. Just keep doing it. And you're like, look at the averages, right? So one thing that we've implemented is just a new CRM. So we've got Salesforce put in, and funny story too around that. Like I was like looking for integrators to help us build like a custom integration dashboard, with the CRM, and to be able to like forecast sales, track sales, and to be able to track customers from click to close, like, from opt-in, if it's from an ad, or we're at like see the whole customer journey. And like, I just wanted that so bad. So I reached out to some integrators in the US, like 3 different companies, and I got quoted 140K, 160K, 190K to build out this dashboard. And I'm like, holy shit, like, is this real? So, like I started looking around, and I found these guys off of Upwork in India that did it for $7,000.
Damn, outsourced.
Yeah, like I'm like, I know global. You can say what you want about globalism, but it worked out okay for me.
Yeah, I actually have a good friends that they always contract a bunch of people in Australia, and they get wild deals. I'm like, they're getting a website built for like a fraction of the cost here, and it makes me question a lot of things. But I'm on the same page.
Yeah, dude, and they're great. Like they're all like the communication. Like there's a little bit of a language barrier there. Like on meetings, I'm having to we got to slow down. But for saving 160 grand, I'm like, hey, I don't really need to know what you're saying.
Yeah. So one piece of why I wanted to speak to you about data was data within the outside world, and with what we've been experiencing over the last year with COVID, with fear, that's driven by fear, that's not driven by data, but that's driven by, well, emotions, as we've discussed. And well, fear in of itself is an emotion, but messages that are coming from the world, and a lack of responsibility to actually take the time to understand data, because the data is there. And so we can speak specifically to COVID, but I think that it's, if you don't give yourself the time to actually understand what's really going on within the world, we're speaking about within your business, I think that life is going to not give to you what you deserve of life, because you deserve to operate life in a way that trusts yourself, that makes decisions based on what truth is, as we've discussed, and doesn't have you always living in fear. And then the flip side of that is, I'm fearful for something levels higher of what we've experienced over the last year,
Yeah.
because I don't think we're prepared.
Yeah. Dude, that's great. I love that. There was actually a study that came out recently on March 8th, and I'll send you the link, like the research article. But the summary was researchers have found that emotionality, the degree to which an attitude is based on feelings and emotions, can create enduring opinions, shedding new light on the factors that can make attitudes last. Basically, what it's implying is if you make an emotional based narrative or an assumption about something, or a conclusion, then that is going to stick with you so much more than if you made something more rational and logical based, right? And we're in this environment where the news is presenting us with constantly emotional based narratives, like, virtue based things. Then,
Mhm.
and if you buy into that and you create that narrative, you allow that narrative to sink in, you're going to be so attached to that that to break free from that, it's going to be really hard,
Yeah.
which
Have
is
you read?
scary.
It's extremely scary. Have you read the book Being Wrong?
No, I
I can't
haven't.
remember if I actually, yeah, I highly recommend that book. Within that book, they speak to the Millerites, and I'm not sure if you know the story about the Millerites, but it's about, I believe it's around like a second coming, and there's these group of individuals that were believing on this specific day, the second coming or something was going to happen. I'm blanking on the details of the story, but on that day in which it didn't happen, their narrative completely switched to, okay, well, now we need to justify why it didn't happen, and we're going to stick to that same narrative and try and just like scoot it into a different story. And what it is it's this concept of control and not wanting to let go, because as soon as we let go and start to commit to, wow, there's a lot that we don't know, then the world seems a lot bigger than it actually did at one point when we kept everything within our control. One of my mentors told me this. He said, when I was 18, I knew everything there was to know, and it was a very safe place. And I was like, fuck, dude, that's so good.
Writing that
Because
down.
it is a safe place, but it's a safe place, you think, but it's actually a very dangerous place. So yeah, I highly recommend that book, Being Wrong. And I just have to, yeah, reflect to you that the way in which narrative, it just seems like that's what's happening. It's like the narrative just shifts just a little bit, so we don't have to completely let go of what we used to think, and not actually look at what is hard coded, hard understood data, which is a very scary way to operate.
Sure is, man. There's a George Orwell quote that I love where it says, "In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act." And that's kind of the phase that we're in right now. Like, dare you say anything that's based on data and evidence, like, because that might hurt somebody's feelings. And it's just like, Jesus fuck, like, where where does this end?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important for us, like, what I really appreciate is just the ability to stand there and stand strong and like have like, this is what I'm seeing and this is what I believe, and I don't have all the answers, and I see that you're committed to that, and you continue to operate like that. And I think it's important for anybody listening to this podcast, anybody that listens to the rest of the Cured Collective podcast or any of Jordan and Aaron's content, like, what we need to do as individuals is commit to the recognition of there's so much that we don't know, and life becomes actually a lot more beautiful when we're committed to that. Because when we recognize that we are wrong about something and we start to shift our perspective, that should actually be like this like grandiose like uncovering of, wow, there's more to life than what I originally thought. And if we stay stuck within one lane and don't let ourselves explore outside of it, then things like actual disease and things like terrible things can happen. The list could go on and on, but it's this perspective shift of like actually saying, wow, this universe is way more grandiose than we actually thought, and life is more grandiose than we actually thought, because there's so much that I don't know. There's more, I don't know more than I know. Like there's so much that I don't know.
Yeah, man, I love that. And it's, well, I'll say this, if we'll be in good company if we end up in a re-education camp, you know, because it's just like, I love the quote too. It's the problem with people who think they know it all is that they have no way of ever finding out that they don't.
Mm.
And so it's like we should constantly be trying to disprove our beliefs, and but we're all guilty of it, right? And I'll be the first to admit that I'm very guilty of it as well. Like I catch myself all the time doubling down on shit that I want to believe, and if somebody has conflicting evidence, it causes emotional arousal, and I'm like, it's like whoa, there's so much nuance that just gets overpassed in today's world. And what this does more on a contextual level is it just allows you to be a better thinker. Like if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in business or whatever, or a relationship, this especially applies in relationships, like you've got to be able to just admit, not even admit that you're wrong, but just at least listen to the other side. Have you read the book Never Split the Difference?
I have it, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, it's so good, dude. It's so good. But just talking about like disarming, aggressive conversations, and how, if you're in a conversation or a debate, another good book that's relative to this is Thank You for Arguing by Jay Hendricks. It's really good. But it's just like the only way that you're ever going to change somebody's mind is by listening and allowing them to change their own mind, right? Like you don't change people through assertive domination. You've got to, and it actually uses like hostage negotiation tactics with conversations to help people. Like, so if there's somebody in your life who they're operating based on just flawed beliefs, and they're just in this, like the allegory in the cave, right? You're like, come on, come peek out here. And they're like, nope, these chains feel pretty good to me. It's like, understand that, well, number one, it's very ego and hubristic to think that you have the power to change people who don't want to change themselves. Period. Like, so if you're getting stressed out because you're like, man, I just wish my friend would just see things the way that's all ego. That's all hubris. But also understanding that if you truly want to help that person, the only way you're going to do that is by listening.
Yeah, you're true, man. I can't remember who originally said this, but we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen more, talk less. Like that's why you have 2 ears. It's true, and a important reminder that I should probably write all over the place for myself, because as you say, like I'm very far from perfect, and it's very easy to intellectualize and repeat something, but to actually live it is a whole nother story. And that's the commitment. That's what we're doing. Well, I appreciate you joining me here today, man. I know you got a hard stop coming here soon, but I just wanted to spend a second. I know you spoke to your businesses there for a minute, but where can people find out more about you, find out more about your businesses, listen to your content, all that good stuff?
Yeah, man. Well, thanks again, dude. I appreciate this. And I was actually going to tell you, man, if we wanted to run a little bit longer, I was going to be late to the meeting. It's all cool, because I love talking to you, man. This is fun. But yeah,
we'll do a round 2.
Yeah, let's do that. Well, hey, we're coming to Denver soon. You're still in Denver, right?
Yep.
So we're gonna be out there definitely this spring sometime, because we actually have 4 people on our team who all live in Denver. So we're talking about doing a little company meetup or retreat at some point in the spring, summer. So I'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah, dude, let me know. We'll be super stoked to have you guys out here and just meet you in person.
I know that's weird. I forget sometimes, like so many people like, oh yeah, we never actually physically met, but
yeah,
I feel like you're really tall, a lot taller than, like, how tall are you?
6 foot.
Okay, 6 foot. Yeah. I had this feeling that I was going to meet you and you're going to be like 6'5". I was like, God damn it, I knew it. But 6 foot, that's a good height. I'm 5'10" technically, but I will go to the death saying that I'm 6 foot. But anyways, you guys can find me on so we have a podcast. It was for a long time, Flow State of Mind. We've since, common marketing mistake where you want to be real clear with your message over cute, and you want to really make sure people know what your thing is. So now it's the Fitness Business Podcast. We talk about not just things related in the business realm, but all things related to transformation and growth and as it pertains to your clients. So like coaches, clients, general people, a lot of people tune in because a lot of the business stuff we talk about applies in all realms, right? Everything is everything. And so that's really what our message is. We're speaking to coaches, but also there's a lot of value for people who want to learn how to get in shape or to operate better. So that's our podcast. We have, let's see, my Instagram is just Doug Aesthetics, and that's probably really hard to find. So if you just look up Jordan Duggar, I'll come up. And my wife, Erin, who's also the business partner, she's at Erin Diamond Fitness. And yeah, just reach out, connect. I'm bad at DMs, but I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And dude, I just appreciate you for having me, man. This is fun.
Yeah, man. Likewise. Super stoked to see you guys here in Colorado. Whenever I do get to meet you guys in person, if it's not here, appreciate your time here today. And like I said, I think there's a lot more for us to discuss. And as we continue on this journey with building businesses, building impact, and building a legacy, like leaving a legacy, it's an honor to know that yourself and Aaron are doing it alongside of myself, and we're committed, man. So appreciate your
Absolutely.
time.
Yeah, man, my wheels are turning. I get really inspired when I talk to people like you. Like I get energy. It's great. So let's connect more often, dude.
Absolutely, brother. Let me close this off for the